My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 27 years old the day my parents chose my sister's fashion show over my medical school graduation. I remember standing outside the auditorium at Columbia University with my white coat folded over my arm and my phone shaking slightly in my hand. The ceremony was about to begin. Families were everywhere, parents adjusting caps, siblings holding bouquets, cameras flashing as everyone captured the moment their child officially became a doctor. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. "Sweetheart, we won't make it today. Olivia's show got moved earlier." Attached was a photo. My younger sister standing on a runway under bright lights, photographers lining the stage, people clapping while she walked confidently toward the end of the platform. The caption my mother added said, "Our star girl shining at New York Fashion Week." No good luck. No "we're proud of you." No mention of the fact that their son was graduating from medical school in 10 minutes. Just runway lights and applause. I stared at the screen so long it dimmed. My fingers felt numb when I finally pressed the call button. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and distracted. I could hear music and chatter in the background. "Daniel, honey, don't be upset," she said quickly. "Olivia's show is a really big deal. This could launch her career." I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's my graduation." There was a brief pause before my father's voice came through the phone. "Your sister has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity today," he said bluntly. 8 years of medical school. Apparently that wasn't one of them. That was the moment something inside me finally stopped trying. But what my parents didn't realize was that their decision that day would eventually bring them to the one place they never expected to see me again, an emergency room where their favorite child's life would depend on the son they had ignored for years. Before I tell you how that happened, let me ask you something. Have you ever been the invisible one in your family? The one who works twice as hard but somehow always stands in someone else's shadow? If you have, then you already know this story didn't begin with that graduation text. It started with years of small moments that slowly taught me I was never meant to be the main character in my own family.
In the Mercer family, there were two kinds of achievements. My sister Olivia's achievements, and everything else. Olivia was 2 years younger than me, and had been the center of attention for as long as I could remember. She was naturally charismatic, beautiful in that effortless way people talk about, and by the time she was 16, she had already started modeling for small clothing brands around the city. My parents treated every one of her photo shoots like it was a national event. They would frame magazine clippings, share her pictures on social media, and invite relatives over just to watch videos of her walking on different runways. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid in the background studying for exams and entering science competitions. When I won a state science fair in high school, my father congratulated me quickly before asking if I could help Olivia move some boxes of clothes to the car. When I received a full scholarship to college, my mother smiled proudly for a moment and then reminded me that Olivia needed help building a website for her modeling portfolio. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that one day, when I became a doctor, they would finally see me the way they saw her. But standing in that auditorium on graduation day, surrounded by cheering families and empty seats where mine should have been, I realized something painful. My parents didn't overlook my achievements. They simply didn't value them. After the ceremony ended, I walked out of the auditorium holding my diploma while dozens of graduates celebrated with their families. People were hugging their parents, taking photos, laughing through tears. I walked past them alone. That night, sitting in my tiny apartment surrounded by half-packed boxes, I opened an email that had been sitting in my inbox for weeks. It was an offer from a hospital in Seattle, a residency program in emergency medicine. At the time I first received the offer, I had hesitated. Moving across the country felt huge. It meant leaving the city I grew up in and starting a completely new life. But after that phone call from my parents, the decision suddenly felt easy. I accepted the offer. Then I sent my parents a simple message. "I'm moving to Seattle next month for residency." My mother replied hours later. "Seattle is far. Are you sure? Olivia might need help managing her brand soon." That was the entire response. No goodbye dinner. No congratulations. Just another reminder that in their world, my life was always expected to revolve around my sisters. So I left. And for the first time in my life, I built a world where no one knew who Olivia Mercer was. Seattle was nothing like home. The hospital never slept. Ambulances arrived constantly, the emergency room buzzing with doctors, nurses, and patients at all hours of the night. Residency was brutal. Long shifts, exhaustion, and constant pressure. But it was also the first place in my life where people looked at me and saw only one thing. Dr. Mercer, not Olivia's brother, not the quiet kid in the background, just a doctor doing his job. For years passed like that, until one night, during a late shift in the emergency department, a nurse rushed toward me holding a patient chart. "We've got a critical case coming in," she said. "Severe infection, possible organ failure." I nodded and reached for the chart. Then I saw the last name, Mercer. My stomach tightened as I scanned the file. The patient's first name was Olivia, and the emergency contact listed on the form was my mother. At that moment, I realized something strange and almost unbelievable. After years of ignoring me, after skipping my graduation and barely speaking to me again, my family had unknowingly brought the one person they trusted most in a medical crisis straight into my emergency room. But the truth about what had happened to Olivia and the secret my parents had been hiding for years was about to change everything I thought I knew about my family. The ambulance doors burst open and two paramedics rushed a stretcher into the emergency room. The woman lying on it looked nothing like the confident girl I remembered from the runway photos. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow, and dark circles framed her eyes. For a moment, I just stood there staring. It really was Olivia, my sister, the same sister my parents had chosen over me again and again. A nurse beside me whispered, "Dr. Mercer?" Her voice snapped me back into focus. Personal history didn't matter here. The only thing that mattered was the patient. I stepped forward and began giving instructions automatically. Start fluids, blood work, prepare antibiotics. My hands moved with the calm efficiency that years of training had built into me. But inside my chest, something twisted painfully. Life had an incredible sense of irony. The one child my parents had always centered their lives around was now lying unconscious on a hospital bed, and the child they ignored was the one responsible for keeping her alive. An hour later, I walked into the waiting room. My parents were sitting side by side on the stiff hospital chairs. My mother looked older than I remembered, her hair streaked with gray, while my father stared at the floor with an expression I had never seen before. Fear. When my mother looked up and saw me, her eyes widened. "Daniel." For a moment, none of us spoke. For years of silence hung between us like a wall. Then she rushed toward me and grabbed my arms. "Your sister is very sick," she said, her voice trembling. "The doctors in New York said you're the best specialist for this kind of infection." I glanced at my father. He avoided my eyes. For years ago, they hadn't been able to cross town for my graduation. Now, they had crossed the entire country because they needed me. But what I discovered about Olivia's illness that night would reveal something far darker than any of us expected. Over the next few hours, we ran dozens of tests. Olivia's infection was severe, but what concerned me more were the patterns in her blood work. There were signs of long-term damage. Her immune system had been weakened for years. Eventually, one of the toxicology results came back, and the truth began to form a picture I didn't like. When I stepped back into the waiting room, my parents immediately stood. "How is she?" my mother asked. "She's stable for now," I said. "But we need to talk." My father crossed his arms defensively. "What do you mean?" I held up the lab report. "Olivia has been abusing substances for years." My mother's face turned pale. "That's impossible," she whispered. But the evidence was undeniable. The infection that nearly killed her wasn't a random illness. It was the result of years of stress, partying, and dangerous habits hidden behind glamorous photos and social media posts. The modeling world my parents had celebrated so proudly had slowly been destroying her health. My father sank into a chair. "She never told us." I almost laughed at that. For years, they had been so busy celebrating her image that they never noticed the reality behind it. But the biggest shock of that night wasn't Olivia's illness. It was the conversation that happened 3 days later when she finally woke up. Olivia woke up weak, but conscious. When I entered her hospital room, she looked at me with tired eyes and managed a small smile. "Hey, big brother." It was the first time she had called me that in years. I checked her monitors while she studied my face. "You're the doctor who saved me?" she asked quietly. "I was part of the team," I said. She looked toward the door, where our parents were speaking to a nurse. Then she said something that made my heart skip. "You know, they never told you the truth about why they always treated us differently, right?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Olivia took a slow breath. "You're not actually their son." For a moment, I thought the exhaustion from my long shifts was playing tricks on me. But she kept talking. "They adopted you when you were a baby. You were the child of one of Mom's cousins who couldn't take care of you." The room suddenly felt very small. "All those years," Olivia continued softly, "they always saw you as someone they helped, not someone who belonged to them the way I did." I stood there in silence, processing a truth that explained decades of confusion. The favoritism, the distance, the way my achievements always felt like they belonged to someone else. I wasn't the forgotten child. I had been the outsider all along. But what happened next would change the story completely. Later that evening, I asked my parents to step into a private room. They knew something was coming. I placed Olivia's chart on the table and looked at them both. "Why didn't you ever tell me I was adopted?" My mother's eyes filled with tears immediately. "We wanted to protect you," she said. "From what?" I asked quietly. "The truth." My father rubbed his forehead. "We took you in because no one else could," he said. "We gave you a home." The words landed like stones. "You gave me a home. Not you were our son. Not we loved you the same. Just a home." For the first time in my life, I understood something clearly. I had spent years trying to earn love from people who never planned to give it. But strangely, the realization didn't hurt the way I expected. Instead, it felt freeing. Because if they had never truly been my family, then I no longer owed them my life. Olivia eventually recovered. The doctors managed to control the infection and stabilize her health. She stayed in Seattle for several months while she rebuilt her strength. And during that time, something unexpected happened. For the first time in our lives, we actually talked. Without cameras, without runways, without our parents turning everything into a competition. She admitted that growing up as the favorite had its own pressure. Every success had to be bigger than the last. Every mistake hidden so it wouldn't disappoint our parents. In many ways, we had both grown up trapped in roles we never chose. When she finally left Seattle, she hugged me tightly before getting into the car. "Thank you for saving my life," she said. I nodded. "You're welcome." My parents tried to reconnect too. They called more often, sent messages, and talked about visiting again. But something inside me had changed. I no longer needed their approval. For the first time in my life, I was simply living my own story. Sometimes people think revenge means destroying someone who hurt you. But the truth is much quieter than that. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply building a life where the people who ignored you no longer control your happiness. And for the first time since that graduation day, I finally felt like the main character in my own life.